Welcome to the Election University podcast, a weekly show where we hear from industry experts who share tips and tricks for winning campaigns. Whether you're running for office now, thinking about it for the future, or just want to know more about campaigns and elections, Election University is for you. With Election University, click, learn, win. And now your host, Jason Bennett and Rainey Cohen.
Hello.
Hi.
How's everyone doing today?
They're probably great.
How are you doing today, then?
I'm also great.
Excellent.
Caffeinated.
Yes.
Exciting.
Today is a good day. We are going to be talking with Jill Barrett about her school board race for the Interlaken School Board. And she's a member now of the school board race. And what we are trying to do on Election University, we've talked several times about these races that have overcome the odds, right? Where you've had to raise thousands of dollars to defeat your opponent. And maybe the race was, had some negative campaigning involved. It was a tough race. You were overcoming some obstacles or defying the odds to win the race. Well, now we're going to take a little bit of a turn. We're going to move in a different direction because not all elections, not all races, not all public service is about having to slog through these difficult circumstances to overcome and then succeed. So
and not every school board race has a $100,000 IE taken out against you. Sometimes you just run a race and you win it or you lose it, and it's kind of drama free.
Right. And right. So Sangeeth Peruri of Voter Circle, during our interview, he is on the Los Altos School Board, had a race where his opposition spent $100,000 in independent expenditure campaigns against him, and he still came out victoriously. And so we want to, address the candidates who are listening, who are thinking about running for office, but maybe aren't quite so sure they want to go through this, unbearable slog.
Like maybe we're scaring them all by only highlighting these big dramatic races with lots of barriers to overcome.
Exactly. So not every race is like that. And today we're going to highlight one amazing woman who, in all disclosure, I've known for 14 years. Her name is Jill Barrett, and she's on the Interlaken School Board.
And she's pretty badass. I'm just looking here at her her resume, and she is a licensed clinical social worker, but has taken her work to the Department of Defense, the New Jersey Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. She is currently the Director of Psychological Health at the New Jersey Air Force National Guard. And talk about someone who is doing great public service. Like, go Jill.
Yeah. So because I want to really underscore how amazing this woman is, she went during the Iraq War to Wiesbaden, Germany, which the U.S. has a big military installation there, and counseled the families of Iraq War soldiers and military personnel dealing with alcohol and drug addiction. So, she's amazing. I want the world to know her story. I particularly want to spotlight her work on the school board and maybe give some hope and inspiration to campaigns or candidates who are thinking about doing this but aren't quite sure they're ready to sign up for all the negativity that they think they're going to be getting.
Right.
So without further ado, let's get to this interview.
Sweet.
Jill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
In the pre-interview, we read off a bit of your resume and bio, but I'm hoping that you could give us a bit more on your background, your work experience, and your political involvement prior to your election on the school board.
Well, sure. I've never ran for office before until I ran for the school board. And the only real political experience that I had before that was working on other campaigns, volunteering for other candidates. So this was my first time taking off as my own candidate. And my background is as a social worker. I have a master's in social work, and I work actually for the Department of Defense right now as a clinical social worker and counselor and advocate for members of the New Jersey Air National Guard.
Interesting. So have you been involved in partisan politics or nonpartisan races before? What is your party experience?
Well, most of the volunteering that I've done before has been for party races. But for me as a federal employee, I fall under the Hatch Act. So I am only allowed to run for nonpartisan office. So actually, school board member was the only office that I was even able to legally run for in town.
For our members who are listening, our listeners out there, what is the Hatch Act and what does it prevent you from doing?
Well, the Hatch Act is, I think it was 1939 is when it was first established. And the intent was to not have federal employees have undue influence on races. So I believe there are some exceptions. I think president and vice president, and I think members of the legislative branch can run for partisan offices, but the rest of the federal employee pool is, restricted, where you can only run for nonpartisan office. Great.
So how did you get involved in the Interlaken School Board?
Well, I have a son who's 9 years old, and he is in the school district that we are actually a very small town, and we're a sending district. We send our kids to another school district with whom we have a contract to send our kids there. And my son goes to the district that we send to, which is called West Long Branch, the name of the district. And one of his classmates' mother actually approached me because they live in town and she was on the school board and they were going to be moving to Washington, D.C. So she was looking for somebody to replace her on the school board. And we had been talking just about how great the sending district was and how happy we were with the classes that our kids were in. And so she said, I think you would be a good replacement for me if you would be interested in it. And so at that time, it sort of, just came to me. It was presented to me as an option. And so I had to interview with the school board, actually. That was back in the fall of 2016. And I interviewed for the position, and the 4 other members on the board, said, yes, we would like you, to be appointed. I guess they voted to appoint me to the seat. And I was appointed in February of 2017 to the seat when Michelle, who had been in the seat, moved to DC.
So do you just so happen to get asked to run for the one seat that you can legally run for?
Yes, right?
That's awesome.
I was like, oh, great. If they had come to me and said, hey, would you like to be on the town council? I would have had to say no.
Right.
So I was appointed in February of 2017, and it was the seat was up that year. So I had to run in November of 2017. So I was appointed in February, but then I actually had to be elected in November.
So was the appointment contentious? Was the appointment contentious at all?
Not to my knowledge at all. I mean, I don't know what, wranglings went on in the executive session of the board meeting, but they presented it as it was a unanimous, vote to appoint me to the seat.
Great. And so the appointment then led to a retention election afterwards to fill out the term, or was it to give you a whole new term? Was it It
was a whole new term. The seat that I filled was coming to the end of its term, and I was then ran for a 3-year appointment, 3-year seat.
And was this an easy decision for you to make, knowing that you aren't eligible to run for most offices? Was running for office a thing that you were even thinking about before? Or was this your first, when she approached you, was that your first kind of thinking about it?
I had always sort of thought that I would like to be involved in having a political office. As I said earlier, I worked on campaigns throughout the course of my life. I've worked on many volunteer campaigns from, president to local state assembly races. I've had a passion for, politics and for, supporting my community. So this was something. Once I became a federal employee, I knew that, I'd have limited options in that way. The other thing I didn't mention is with the Hatch Act, I can donate to political campaigns, but I can't solicit contributions for any political campaign. So it really took my foot out of a lot of the work that I had been doing in supporting political campaigns. I can volunteer and I can donate as an individual, but I couldn't ask either of you to contribute to a particular campaign because that would be in violation of the Hatch Act.
Including your own?
No, not my own.
You can do it on your own, but you can't do it for anybody else.
Yes, but I can solicit campaign funding for my own election to a school board because it's a nonpartisan office.
Aha.
But I can't, if I ran as, a Democrat for the town council, first of all, I couldn't even do that. But if I ran for anything that was party affiliated, I couldn't ask for money.
Got it. Okay.
That's my read on the Hatch Act. I mean, maybe some of your listeners might know that legislation better than I do, but that's sort of how I've viewed it and where I have to draw the lines for myself.
It's interesting because I knew its application from folks who worked in, say, House members or Senate campaign offices that then turn around, staff of elected officials who then turn around and run for office, but not for other federal employees. I was not aware of some of those restrictions. I didn't know that you were prohibited from running for partisan office. I thought you were allowed to. So that's very interesting. That makes sense. I mean,
as a professional.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sounds good.
So I'd love to know more about the election itself, because we mentioned this in the intro. We are very concerned about making sure that candidates have a full understanding of what they're getting themselves into and that they don't spend a ton of time recreating the wheel or chasing down information. We want to spoon feed the information as much as we possibly can to candidates. And the challenge on that is not all races are exactly the same. So we wanted to spotlight your race, which was, I think, by all measures, on the easier side of what typical campaigns are, and also spotlight that they aren't necessarily rare, that there are positions out there you can hold public office without negative attack ads and having to raise thousands of dollars. You can still get involved in your community in these other ways.
Yes. And mine was certainly not contentious at all. My town of Interlaken we have just over 395 homes in the town. Maybe we have approximately 820 residents. We're a very small town. We have no commercial district, no business district. We're just strictly a residential suburb. And we have actually our biggest challenge is getting people to be involved in some kind of political way in town. We are always looking for people to run for council. Right now, we're actually looking for someone to run. We have a school board seat that's coming to the end of its term. And I've been sort of, trying to advocate with my neighbors and anybody I know in town so that we could get another person who would be willing to run for the school board seat that's going to be coming vacant. So for me, I think that, it is important to be involved in our community, even though it is so small. But my election was fairly simple. I had to get enough signatures. I did some doorbelling to get a big enough petition together so that I could make it on the ballot. So I was out in the community letting people know that I would be running that I was on the board and I would be running for the seat that I was in. And I got a whopping 245 votes to get in.
Nice. How much money did you have to raise?
I didn't raise a dime.
Wow.
Hear that, listeners?
Just
there are those seats out there.
It works. You can get 245 votes.
You have to move to Interlaken to do it, but
that's awesome.
That's awesome. So on the campaign trail, were there any particular moments that you want to highlight that were particular high points or low points for you? I'm imagining when it comes to school board, there are 5 million opinions about what you should be doing, or actually 846, however many homes there are there, residents.
Yes, the 395, and I didn't hit them all, so.
So I'm curious to know what it's like wrangling that for school board, where I imagine many contentious issues bubble up and you're having to deal with many different personalities and opinions on these issues.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that the biggest challenge for us is that being such a small town, we don't have our own school district. So we, for many years, had been sending our kids, even before I moved into town, to another district where the school system was getting very bad, low ratings for their performance. And so for many, many years, our town had been, many of the residents send their kids to private school because they didn't feel like the public school that was our sending district was an option. And it had been our sending district for, I want to say, since the 1940s or 50s. So when I started talking to folks, we had just recently, in I think it was 2013 or 14, changed the agreement with it. So we were sending our kids to the West Long Branch district, which was brand new when I sort of started to politic to get into the seat when I was running. And a lot of the opinions that I heard were sort of the taxes had gone up when we changed districts. Not considerably, but enough where, as soon as, the taxes are raised, there's a lot of questions about, is this the best investment? What, do we really think that the school district is better? Can we send our kids to public school now? So those sorts of things came up. And it's, New Jersey has very high property taxes, probably one of the highest in the nation. So any, increase in those taxes gets people hot because they're spending a lot of money to begin with.
Yeah.
And so I would say that my biggest challenge was making sure that I was advocating for the existing board and the board that I was just recently appointed to, that this had been a good, investment, and that, my passion really is for my community. And I think that we have to have a good public school option because that's what makes us unique, makes us a community where we can all send our kids to the same school. We only have 395 approximately residences, but we've got probably 6 or 7 different private schools that people were sending their kids to. So you really didn't get to know your neighbors all that well because your kids weren't in school together. So I still do believe that having a good public school option is really important for a community. And so I faced a lot of talk about money. Everybody wanted to know, are you a good steward of this increase in our property taxes?
So we know that sexism is alive and well in politics, and you're a mom and you work full time, and often women candidates are almost attacked in line of questioning of how are you going to have time for this? What is your plan? And are asked questions in a way that male candidates are not asked the same questions. And so I'm curious, one, did you encounter any of that? And two, some of that is a deterrent for other women who are thinking about running for office. And so do you have any advice or anything to say to those women who might be thinking about it but haven't crossed the threshold and made the decision?
Well, I think I would say that it's, as being a mom and a working mom and a single mom, I don't know anybody else who multitasks better. I think that as women, we do face a lot of sexism, and I think that what we have to demonstrate is that, it's all of that is untrue, that we can do this. And I will tell you that my son comes with me to board meetings, and he sits in the audience, and sometimes because we're such a small town, he's the only one in the audience. But I think it's important, and I have to say, as a parent, that I think that it's so important to role model for him how important it is to be active in your community. And I know one of the high points of this journey for me was when I was sworn in. My son Andreas came to the swearing in, and he actually held the Bible while I took the oath.
Nice.
And the look on his face the whole time that it was going on was just, it was really motivating for me because he was watching his mom, be involved in her community and take a leadership role. And what better way, I think, to work against this incessant sexism, in our culture and in politics, to show my son that, women can do this and that we are just as capable and we belong here just as much as anybody else.
Love this.
Yeah, me too. What is the current makeup of your school board, gender and ideology? And I don't mean necessarily political ideology. I mean, you are coming from a very pro-public school background. Do you have folks who disagree with that viewpoint? Maybe some other issues that would be splintering on the board?
I think right now our board is we're very well meshed. We seem to all have very similar ideas, about how important, having this public school option is. We've got 2 males and 3 females. We're only 5 board members. We're a small board. And the president is a small business owner. And then we have an attorney. We have a nurse. We have a former educator, and then myself as a social worker. So we really do have a nice mix, I think, of different professions and perspectives on the board. And I would say that, when we have differences of opinion, being a small board, we really can work it out fairly quickly in an executive session because we all respect each other. And like I said, we're small, so we can really have a meaningful discussion amongst the 5 of us.
In your opinion, do you think that you have to be a parent in order to be an effective school board member?
No.
Why?
I don't think so. I think we have one member of our board who is not a parent, and I think that he offers an excellent perspective to us because as a parent with a child in the district, I know that I have a little bit of perception bias here and there because my main motivator, is I know what's going on in the schools and I can see things in a little bit different way. But he's very good at sort of keeping us on track, and I think he offers a great perspective because in a lot of ways we have, we're stewards of the taxpayers' money.
Right.
And I don't think that you have to be a parent to be a good steward.
Well, and for the record, I agree with that. I've just seen school board races where people might be getting attacked for not having children of their own. And as a person, I think that's ridiculous. So I just thought I would see what your opinion was.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that I think all perspectives are important.
So I think for the listeners who are weighing their options of whether or not they're going to take this leap and balance their work commitments and their family commitments and the sacrifice of personal time that it takes to be a public servant, what do you think about the time commitment between what you thought it might be and what it is? Is it about what you thought it was? Is it more or is it less? How do you feel about the amount of time that you spend doing this work?
I think it has turned out to be what I expected. I knew that I would have to make some accommodations, and it is a balancing act often with the responsibilities of, working full time, having a part-time private practice, parenting my son, taking care of my house. I mean, it's often I have to carve out time to have not just the board meetings, but we also have outside, telephone calls and strategizing sessions. There's different forms and paperwork that need to be completed. I have to take time out to review, budgets and agendas. And you find a way to make it work. It goes back to multitasking. Sometimes I'm, reading an agenda while, the lasagna's in the oven or just, my son is doing his homework. So it's like, oh, wait, I have a financial disclosure form I have to fill out while he's doing his homework. Let me fill that out. I mean, it's doable. I think for me personally, that you just sort of, it fits into your schedule. If you commit to it, then you find a way.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Now that you've had some time on the board, what do you think is your proudest accomplishment? I
think one of the things that I feel like I've been able to provide the board is a perspective on mental health and how important the mental health component of education is. And I mean that by one of the issues that often comes up with school boards is the amount of money that's spent on special education. Because we are a sending district, we have line items. We get a bill from the district that we send to, and we have tuition, but then outside of the tuition costs, we pay extra for any special education costs that aren't provided in the standard tuition. And I do think that my participation on the board helps the rest of the board understand the importance of the accommodations that need to be made for certain students. And, you know, it's always that balance again of being caring and compassionate towards every student in the district, but also, again, being good stewards of the funding. And I do think that I can offer a perspective that helps the other members see the importance, you know, of making sure that every kid in our town can get an education.
Yeah.
What is the best way to advocate for a kid with special needs? Is that through the school board, or is it through faculty at particular schools? What kind of resources are out there for parents who don't know how to navigate that kind of a system?
Well, I think the best place is to really get to know your child's study team in your district, and really working very closely with them on what resources are available through the district. There are, I know in New Jersey, we have certain associations and certain special advocacy groups for children with special needs. And I think that parents, need to know where those resources are. It can be a contentious relationship often between a parent and the child study team.
Yeah.
And I think that's, has a lot to do with parents not necessarily wanting their children to be labeled with certain needs, but unfortunately, it's often those labels that are going to give them the resources that they need for their child to succeed in the system. So, I mean, there's a lot of different nuances to all that, but I do say your child study team is your best first line advocate.
Are you dealing as a school board with school shooting follow-up? Like, are you having to deal with demand for schools to do something? How are you struggling with that? Is there any discussion on the board about it?
We are discussing it with the West Long Branch School Board, because again, that's the school board that has the facilities, so they would be responsible for the safety and the security of the buildings. And so we're we've had discussions with them about what are the best options. And then again, it's hard for us as the Interlaken board because again, we don't have facilities. So for us to have a discussion about how to, better protect our students really has to go through our sending district. And because we're such a small town, we can't get a seat on the West Long Branch School Board until we have 10% of our students make up of the population of the total school. So Interlaken has to be 10% of the school population, and we're not at 10%. So right now we don't have a seat on the West Long Branch board. We have an agreement with them. They can, we can advocate for our students, but unfortunately we don't have a vote yet. So that's part of my goal as a board member is I would like to advocate and more for parents in our town who have traditionally been sending their kids to private school to really consider the public school as an option. Because the more kids that we can get in the public school, then the more of a voice we can get into our sending district. So that might be a question coming up later, but that's one of my goals.
Yeah. Are there
as a board member?
Proportionally, are there more kids who are going to private school because you're a sending district, or is it just a regular amount?
I think it's a variety of reasons.
Okay.
Why some parents just would choose a private school, either way. But I do think that because traditionally our town has had a sending district that was was a district that had very low scores, that it was just always, it was sort of word of mouth. Our town was always known as, oh, it's a beautiful place, but you have to send your kids to private school. Was sort of was always sort of the rumor on the street.
Right.
But now that we've renegotiated, and there was a lot of, there was an opposition to moving school districts because of the raise in the property taxes in town. But once that was approved, and now we had a 7-year contract, and I think we're in the 5th year of that 7-year contract. So just hoping that as more and more parents like myself, and as a board member, we're out in the community letting folks know what a great school district, we've negotiated this contract with, that more and more of our parents will be willing to send their kids there.
So you are on a 3-year term, is that correct?
Yes.
So you'll be up again in 2020?
Yes.
Well, what a fun ballot that'll be.
Oh, yes.
Are you planning?
I might get more than 245 votes.
Yeah, because of the higher turnout. Yeah, exactly. The turnout will be really high in the presidential election, I'm sure. So if folks wanted to be involved in your campaign or get in touch with you, how would they do that if they want to help your reelection efforts?
Oh, well, they could certainly, if you're in Interlaken and you're listening to this, please come out and vote, or you can come by my house and ask to volunteer. I don't know what to say.
Do you have a campaign email address?
Come on. No, I don't have a campaign email address.
God,
she didn't have to raise any money. She doesn't need any infrastructure. Just knock on doors and get votes.
I don't even have a website. I had nothing. I had a petition with 10 names on it.
Well, we're going to have to fix that. We're going to have to get a website and make it real snazzy and get a campaign email address. How about like electjillbarrett@gmail.com? How about something like that?
I like that. All right. When you edit this, you can put in whatever you want.
What are speaking of which, what are the contribution limits for a race like this?
I don't know.
Because you didn't raise any money.
I didn't raise any money.
I have no idea.
I love this.
All right, final question. Final question. In your opinion, like political professionals, political parties, interest groups that do trainings for candidates and help recruit them, do they do a good job, or do they fall short, do you think, in preparing candidates for office? Do you feel like there's enough support out there for folks? And what would you change specifically if you had a magic wand and could change anything about the way this is getting done?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I think that there is more work to be done on the recruitment side. I think what seems unfortunate is the way that the media and social media portrays, running for office as, it's always a bloodbath, that it's always contentious, that I think it does scare people away from wanting to run for office, even in their local community. So I do think that more outreach should be done at a grassroots level by the organizations that recruit people, that word of mouth really is a good way to get folks involved. But I don't run into too many people throughout, the course of my daily life who are talking about, oh, have you ever thought about being involved?
Right.
I think, I was very lucky to have an associate, a friend, a neighbor who thought that I would be a good substitute for her.
Right.
And I think that it's the time commitment that scares people away.
Right.
And I know it goes back to the question you were asking me earlier, Rainey, which is that when I approach my neighbors about being on the school board, their first reaction is one of sort of exasperation.
Right.
Oh, I just don't think I could. Oh, I would love to, but we've got so much going on. It is, I think, because culturally we all feel so overtaxed that the idea of adding something else to the plate is the negative. It sort of, people sort of coil away from it. Where I think we're missing the message when we're in recruitment is really tapping into that passion, that if this is important to you, you'll find a way.
Right. Another thing that people run into is, I don't want to put my life on display. I'm a private person, and if I run for office, then suddenly I lose all my privacy. Was that your experience, or were you able to kind of hold some stuff back?
I think that it was something I considered. That I think anytime you're in the public eye, of course, that comes with a level of scrutiny that I don't think anybody is 100% comfortable with. And I certainly wasn't, thinking that I would make a decision that my neighbors wouldn't like. Those kinds of things did come up for me. I remember having to fill out a financial disclosure form after I was appointed, and it asked you where all your sources of income come from. And I had a moment when I was like, oh, I don't know if I signed up for this. Well, I guess I did. So,
full steam ahead. Yeah. Right.
And so I do think that definitely is an issue for folks. But again, I think anything in our current political climate, in our current cultural malaise, if I can call it that, I don't think that that's enough of an excuse not to do anything.
Right.
Anymore. And that's sort of, I'm not, I was sort of approached with this, but I jumped at the chance to have an opportunity as a federal employee to do something for my community in a way where I could serve, because I'm just so desperately afraid of what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think that we're seeing that as we have more candidates that are willing to run, is because even though we're all overtaxed and exhausted and doing so many different things, that there really is that passion there, and you have to sort of overlook the time constraints and the public scrutiny to say, no, this is important enough for me that I have to take a risk, because if I do nothing, I'm just going to go on, social media every morning and be disgusted.
Right. Now that you are an elected official, is there an office that you would run for if you were not a federal employee?
I believe that I would. Yes. I believe that I would be interested in starting smaller, starting small, and maybe looking at, running for town council or maybe a county. We have county freeholders in Monmouth County, New Jersey, or looking at one of those offices. Would be something that maybe I would consider someday when the Department of Defense is done with me.
You think the school board's like the gateway position for wanting to go at higher office?
Maybe, if the town dog catcher is a nonpartisan office, I could go for that.
But you're going to have to get a campaign email for that and a website.
We'll need a campaign for that.
Yeah.
But I think that for your listeners out there who are considering it, who aren't sure if they can do it, I will tell you can do it. I think that if you put the passion and the commitment to it, that you just figure out a way.
Yeah.
To make it work, and that there are people out there to support you. I was surprised at how many people supported me. Neighbors that I didn't even know really knew who I was, came up to me and they said, "Oh, you're on our school board. I saw your name on the ballot." And I was like, "Oh, hello. Have we met before?" So I do think that it is something that you can find a way to make it work. And does it take time away from, my son and I sometimes? It does, but I feel like it's worth it because it's for his future.
Right. That's amazing.
And he comes along.
Yeah.
I try to incorporate him as much as I can in what's happening.
Have him fill out the financial forms.
I know, right? Well, the hardest part about filling out the financial forms was how pathetic it actually looked. I am only a social worker.
That's amazing. Well, when you decide that you're going to go for re-election, we will make sure that our listeners out there are signed up and ready to help. Jill, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to have an opportunity to talk about my journey on the school board.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Another big thank you to Jill Barrett of the Interlaken School Board. Thank you so much for joining us today.
She's so cool.
She is so cool. I
like her.
She's really fun. And a lot of great information in there, I think, for folks who are, weighing the options.
Yeah. Well, she's a great example of, regular people can and should be running for office, and it doesn't have to be an enormous lift.
Right.
Like, she raised no money.
Yeah.
And just talk to people.
Yeah. I'd love to talk to, more candidates who have had divergent experiences necessarily from what the norm is or what you read in the paper. I think her perspective on making sure that folks understand that not everything that you see about what campaigns are like is actually what they are like.
Right.
And I think that was very valuable information for folks who are, just deciding whether or not they want to do this.
Totally.
They want to pull the plug. So again, big thank you to Jill Barrett of Interlaken School Board. We really appreciate you doing that. Listeners, what did you think? We'd love to hear your feedback as well. You can head on over to iTunes or whatever. I should let you know this.
What?
We are on Castbox, which is a new, it's supposed to be a new popular up and coming app for podcasting. Folks who want to, aggregate their podcasts and listen to them in a particular way or order. It's a fun app. I downloaded it. It's pretty fun.
Thanks,
so we're on there now.
Castbox.
Yeah, they're pretty awesome. Very popular. Lots of venture capital money going their way. And so however you're listening to us, whether it's on iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, Spotify, we're on all of them now. And we would love your feedback. So leave us a comment. We are checking them regularly. We appreciate them. We love the ratings. It actually helps us in the search items when folks are looking for election content, campaign content. Your comments help increase the algorithm or some weird magic formula that I don't understand.
Well, and they also helps us. Let us know what content you want to hear. If you have an idea for a podcast, we're doing this for you. So you let us know.
Absolutely.
You can leave comments or you can email us at podcast@electionu.com. Do we have any new countries?
We do.
Listening?
Yeah, this one's a little weird.
My favorite part.
It's not, the country's not weird. I don't mean to say that whatsoever, but we've had an unusually high download rate in the United Arab Emirates for some reason.
Okay.
The UAE, for some reason, we've had a big spike in downloads between last week and this week.
All right.
So hello, friends.
Welcome to the audience.
Hello, friends in the United Arab Emirates. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I don't know. I can't figure out the rhyme or reason, but
I'm not questioning it.
I'm thinking that we have some U.S. listeners who are involved in politics who are traveling around the globe, and they're probably listening to us, is my guess. I doubt we have content that's relevant to the United Arab Emirates, but maybe we do. I don't know.
Who knows?
We're not going to dissuade anybody from any country from listening to our podcast.
Email us and tell us who you are.
Yeah, we would love
That'd be fun.
to know. And if you're doing campaigns out in these areas, let us know. We would love the perspective. So thanks to our listeners again for another excellent episode of Election University podcast. I'm Jason Bennett.
And I'm Rainey Cohen.
We'll catch you next week. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. This week's episode has ended, but the campaign fun doesn't have to. Head on over to www.electionu.com, where you can access all of the links mentioned in today's episode, as well as the show notes. There you can also sign up for regular announcements or register for our campaign school. It's your very own online personal trainer for winning campaigns. www.electionu.com. Click, learn, win.